We created this video with the intention of informing you about hazards in the workplace and explaining what your obligations and responsibilities are regarding occupational safety. You will also learn what measures need to be implemented to create a safe work environment, which is a priority of every responsible employer. To begin with, we will clarify the difference between two key concepts for occupational safety: hazard and risk. Hazard is the general name for anything that can cause injury or illness to a worker in the work process, while risk is composed of two elements: severity and the probability of the occurrence of harm. First of all, we need to know how to identify hazards in the work process in order to know how to reduce risks. We control the risks with appropriate safety measures at work. These measures can be of organizational or technical type. Here are some examples of occupational safety measures. Install appropriate protective devices on work equipment. Train workers to work in a safe way. Periodically inspect and test work equipment. Mark danger zones with safety signs. Provide the necessary personal protective equipment. There are a number of other measures implemented to prevent and reduce the number of injuries at work and potentially dangerous situations. We will present some of them in this video. To begin with, we will introduce you to the basic safety principles that you need to follow while working. You should always come to work rested, healthy, and physically fit, so that you can carry out the work tasks that await you that day with full attention. When you start working at your new workplace, you first need to be familiar with the workspace. It is important that you are familiar with the evacuation plan and that you know where the evacuation routes, emergency exits, and emergency assembly point is. You need to know where fire extinguishers and handheld fire alarms and first aid equipment are located. Furthermore, you need to be familiar with workplace safety signs. They are set up for a specific purpose. Never damage, move, or obstruct them. It is forbidden to type on the mobile phone during operation. You should always be focused on your work tasks because even a brief moment of inattention can cause serious consequences. The intake and consumption of alcohol and other addictive substances is strictly prohibited. Never smoke in a manufacturing plant or warehouse, as it is harmful to health and can be a cause of fire. Be sure to familiarize yourself with your employer's basic occupational safety document. This is a risk assessment, and it must be available to you at the workplace. A risk assessment describes what dangers, harms, and efforts you will encounter while doing your job. Also, the risk assessment defines what measures need to be taken to keep the risks under control and you safe. What are your core responsibilities? Participate in the work process in the manner determined by the rules of occupational safety and the instructions of the employer. Use the prescribed personal protective equipment if you have borrowed it. Report to your supervisor any omissions related to occupational safety, as well as situations that could cause injuries. Take care of your own safety and the safety of your colleagues you work with. Workplace hazards can be classified into several categories based on their nature, potential impact, and the type of hazard. Here are some common types of workplace hazards. Mechanical safety hazards are a type of physical hazard that results from machinery, equipment, tools, and other mechanical devices in the workplace. Slips, trips, and falls. Physical hazards like noise, vibration, temperature, radiation. Electrical hazards. These hazards are caused by electricity and electrical equipment. Fire and explosion hazards. Chemical hazards. These hazards are caused by chemicals and chemical processes. Biological hazards. Ergonomic hazards. Psychological hazards. It's important for employers to identify and manage these hazards to provide a safe and healthy workplace for their employees. Falls are one of the most common causes of injuries at work, and the consequences of falls are often fractures and severe complications. The most common falls are at the same level due to tripping, slipping, or twisting the joint. Falls at the same level often occur as a result of damaged flooring or stairs. Different floor levels, i.e. differences in floor height when moving from one space to another. Congested passages and transport routes. Spilled liquids or wet floors. And extension cables stretched across passageways. Danger from objects falling on the floor can also cause a fall. Keep all aisles passable and always make sure the workspace is well lit. Never leave goods, pallet boxes, packaging, production waste, or any other items on the aisles. Transport routes should always be free and clear. If there are obstacles, they must be visibly marked. The most dangerous are falls in depth, and especially falls from heights, because they often result in severe and even fatal injuries. When performing work at height, first of all, one should try to take it from the appropriate scaffolding, work platforms, and lifting baskets intended for that purpose. It is not allowed to lift people with a forklift without a suitable lifting basket. If you use ladders, always place them on a flat and stable surface and secure them from slipping or ask someone to support them. When doing work on a ladder, you should always follow the 3-point support rule. So it is important that you are in contact with the ladder at 3 points of contact at all times. For example, with 2 legs and 1 arm. Single-legged ladders are placed at an angle of 75 degrees, and this is also called the 4-to-1 rule. So, when the ladder is placed against the wall, they should be moved away from it by a quarter of the height. The easiest way to determine this is to count the rungs on the ladder and divide it by 4. So, for example, if the ladder has 12 rungs, the ones at the bottom should be away from the wall by a length corresponding to a distance of 3 rungs. When safe work surfaces and guardrails cannot completely reduce the risk of falls from a height, it is essential that workers use a safety belt with a rope. Mechanical hazards most often occur when working with work equipment, when handling and working with work objects, and when moving at work. Sources of mechanical hazards are most often motion transmission elements that can affect parts of the worker's body. But there are many other sources of mechanical hazards in the work process that can cause impact or crushing of the worker's body. To protect workers from mechanical hazards, guards or protective devices are placed around rotating and dangerous parts of the machine. We most often encounter shields in the form of armor, covers or fences, and many machines often have built-in and more complex protective devices. This can be, for example, a 2-handed control system where the worker must press the machine start buttons with both hands at the same time to prevent the worker from entering the danger zone of the machine with one hand and activating the machine with the other. Newer machines, depending on the design, have different versions of more sophisticated automatic protection devices, for example, photocells, sensors, and the like. Regardless of the design, the guards and protective devices must always be in place, properly fitted, and functional. Sometimes you may feel that your protective devices are slowing you down. However, keep in mind that shortcuts will not always speed up the execution of a task, and improvisations can cause accidents and completely stop production if someone is seriously injured. Therefore, never remove or block the protective devices from the machine to speed up the work, as this endangers your life and health, as well as all other persons who handle this work equipment, and thus commit a criminal offense for which you can be held liable and imprisonment. There are 3 basic rules when working with work equipment. First, work equipment must be used exclusively according to the purpose and specific working conditions provided by the work equipment manufacturer. Second, do not handle work equipment for which you are not properly trained and qualified. And third, use only work equipment that is in good condition. Also remember the following. The operating instructions must be read before handling. Be sure to know how the control devices work, what the individual switches, buttons, or controls are for, and how to stop the machine in an emergency. Although the employer is responsible for the maintenance and repair of work equipment, you are obligated to inspect the work equipment daily before using it and check for visible damage. You should immediately inform your order of any defects. In the event of any malfunction of the machine or other than normal operation, example overheating, vibration, and noise, or fault or damage to electrical installations, stop work immediately and report the fault to the responsible manager or maintenance department. Never work on work equipment that has been put out of use. The work suit must be buttoned and fastened to the body, and must not be worn with a tie, jewelry, or any part of clothing that may catch the tool or parts of the machine in motion. Do not work with music headphones. Never interfere with the operation of another person while operating the machine. Before leaving the workplace, work equipment should be left in such a condition that it does not endanger other workers. It's not just big machines that are dangerous. Hand tools, devices, and gadgets often pose a risk of injury, especially stabs and cuts to all people who use them. The following rules apply to the use of handheld devices and tools. All handheld devices and tools must be thoroughly inspected before use, and all parts and guards must be checked for correctness. Before starting to work with handheld devices, consider its weight and shape. When performing work, take the correct body position. When working with handheld devices and tools, you should always have appropriate personal equipment to protect your hands and eyes, and when working with noisy machines, you must protect your hearing. Do not add handheld devices to others while they are in operation. When working in elevated places, make sure that tools and devices cannot fall. Never carry sharp and pointed tools in your trouser pockets. When you cut something, you should always do it opposite to your body, not towards yourself. And be sure to wear protective gloves. When finished, clean and correctly dispose of devices and tools. Everyday use of electrical devices reduces the feeling of the real risk of the consequences that the action of electricity can have on humans. Electric current can cause injuries to the body and, in some cases, the death of workers. Electric shock injuries are most often caused by improper grounding or damage to the insulation of electrical accessories due to poor handling, falling of the electrical device to the floor, wear and tear, or poor maintenance. There are certain rules you need to follow when working with electricity. Electrically operated devices must be handled with care. Avoid any improvisation. Keep the connecting cables away from heat sources, sharp edges, and moving parts. It is forbidden to use electrical devices and extension cables if the connecting cable is damaged. Extension cables must be adequately covered with a protective cover if installed in a walking area. Never overload sockets or extension cords. Sockets or switches that are hot or hot to the touch are a sign of overload and can cause a fire. Such appliances should be switched off immediately and discontinued until inspected by a qualified person. In the event of faults or malfunctions of work equipment connected to the electrical installation, example, unusual noise, sparks, smell of burning insulation, tingling sensation when touching electrical equipment, switch off the power immediately or remove the load plug from the socket. Pull the plug out of the socket by grasping the plug by hand and then pulling it out. Do not pull the plug out of the socket by pulling on the power cord, as this may pull the socket out of the wall. Damaged switches, plugs, and sockets must never be touched with your fingers as they may be live. Immediately report any defects you notice on the electrical installations. If you notice that switches, sockets, or plugs are damaged, cracked, or non-existent, notify the authorized person or maintenance personnel immediately. If the protective switch or circuit breaker is switched on and off frequently, this is a sign of a fault in the installation. Do not make repairs yourself. This can only be done by a qualified personnel. The risk of electrical shock is higher in wet or humid areas. Do not use or operate wet electrical appliances. Also, do not work with wet hands and without proper footwear. With increased noise levels in the workplace, the worker is not able to participate normally in the work process. He cannot communicate normally. He cannot monitor sound signals, and all this affects occupational safety and health. In addition, a worker who works in noise gets tired faster and becomes more nervous, which often leads to injuries at work. And most importantly, noise affects a person by damaging his hearing. The higher the intensity of the noise, the more frequent the exposure to noise, the faster the worker will feel hearing problems. Therefore, when working in noise, it is necessary to use personal protective equipment for hearing protection, earmuffs or earplugs against noise. In addition to noise, vibrations also have a particularly harmful effect on the human body. We distinguish two types of vibrations: hand-arm vibrations and whole-body vibrations. Hand-arm vibrations are mechanical vibrations that, when transmitted to the hand and arm, cause risks to the safety and health of workers, especially vascular, bone and joint, neurological, and muscular disorders. Operators of manual machines and workers holding objects that are in direct contact with the vibrating parts of the machines are exposed to these vibrations. For example, these are workers who work with machines for cutting, grinding, polishing, and the like. Harmful effects of vibration on handheld power tools are prevented by fitting a shock absorber to the tool holder, coating the tool handle with an anti-vibration material, example rubber, and using anti-vibration gloves and other protective equipment. Whole body vibrations are mechanical vibrations that, when transmitted to the whole body, cause back diseases and spinal damage. People driving self-propelled machines and similar means of transport, such as forklifts, are exposed to the effects of whole body vibration. The term chemical hazard includes substances that may cause damage to the health of persons who come into contact with them during production, handling, transport, storage, or use. Chemical hazards can be in liquid, solid, or gaseous state and can enter the body in the following ways: by inhalation, absorption via skin and eyes, and/or ingestion, eating or swallowing. Chemicals used in various work processes can often be corrosive, flammable, and explosive. Toxic substances such as solvents ingested cause poisoning and damage certain organs. Corrosive substances such as acids and alkalis cause damage to the skin, eyes, respiratory tract, and digestive organs. Highly flammable and/or explosive substances include, for example, technical wastes, liquid fuels, and various lubricants. The following instructions should be followed when handling hazardous chemicals. Read the manufacturer's instructions for the safe use and storage of chemicals before use. Hazardous chemicals should always be packaged and labeled in such a way that their use does not endanger the safety and health of workers. Containers in which chemicals are stored must always be tightly closed. When working with hazardous chemicals, be sure to use the prescribed personal protective equipment. If symptoms of chemical poisoning occur, first aid should be sought immediately. Bottles of mineral water, juices, alcoholic, and other recognizable drinks must not be used for the storage of dangerous chemicals because their contents can be accidentally drunk by someone. If dangerous liquids are drunk, drink plenty of water, do not induce vomiting, and seek medical attention. Also, the doctor should be informed exactly which fluid was ingested. Harm to the health of workers is often dust from machine or manual processing of materials. The effects of dust on human health depends on its chemical composition and duration of exposure, from allergic effects to toxic and carcinogenic effects. When dust is generated in the technological process, preventative measures should be taken first of all to prevent the spread of dust into the working environment. This can be achieved, for example, by installing local ventilation on the dust source, sealing the process, and regular cleaning. Respiratory protection should be worn in workplaces where dust from the work environment cannot be completely eliminated. Depending on the type of technological process, in addition to dust particles, the air we breathe in the production plant may contain various harmful fumes, gases, and vapors that can be irritating, corrosive, narcotic, and even carcinogenic to the body. Various adhesives, paints, and solvents used in the manufacturing industry can cause fatigue, dizziness, headache, nausea, decreased comprehension, and mild or severe poisoning in the exposed worker. If you work with such hazardous substances, be thorough in maintaining personal hygiene. Use appropriate personal protective equipment. Make sure the ventilation system is on, and if not, then ventilate the work area regularly if possible. The most common places and actions potentially dangerous for the occurrence and spread of fires include places of storage, i.e. storage of flammable and explosive substances, gas cylinder storages, space for the use of cleaning agents and various solvents, waste storage sites, devices, equipment, and installations that may cause the occurrence and spread of fire, use of glue, use of open flame during operation, use of sparking devices and tools, boiler rooms and power plants, and battery-operated devices. In order to limit the risk of fire to an acceptable level, fire protective measures are taken, and your duty is as follows. If you work with tools that use sparks or work with open flames, always make sure that there is a fire extinguisher near you, especially if you do so near flammable material. Smoking is allowed only if there is a specially designated and marked place. Never smoke near the storage of flammable liquids or other flammable materials. Handle flammable substances correctly and do not handle them near hazardous heat sources. Use machines, devices, and equipment on purpose and do not overload them. Do not leave flammable materials such as greasy cloths, paper, sawdust, packaging, and the like. Never lean combustible materials directly on the wall. The fire door must never be blocked from closing. Never leave goods in front of the hydrant wall cabinets or electrical distribution cabinets. They should always be reachable and accessible. We lift the load every day and carry it by hand without thinking too much about it. Improper weightlifting and excessive exertion can cause health damage and disease. Therefore, it is necessary to lift and transfer loads in a proper and trained way. And now we will show you how to do it. First, you should stand next to the load and turn in the direction in which the load is planned to move. Then, take the correct wide position for balance. The feet should be widely spaced with one foot slightly forward. You should squat so low that the object can be held securely. Shoulders and back should be kept upright at all times. Lift the load close to the body as much as possible. The heaviest side of the load should be held close to the body. Lift lightly without jerking the strength of the leg muscles until the legs are straight and the back is straight. The danger of manual transport of cargo increases the more tired the worker is. If one overestimates one's own possibilities and seizes the cargo unsafely, due to fatigue, reflexes become numb, movements become slower, and gait more insecure, so the load is incorrectly lifted and gripped unsafely, which makes transport difficult. Whenever possible, always use mechanical aids to transport loads, such as transport carts, rudders, pallet trucks, etc. Always use the type of transport that is suitable for the load you are transporting. Before stacking the goods, place the trolley in a position that will allow you the easiest loading and secure them from moving. Do not place the goods so that they protrude beyond the edges of the trolley, and check the stability of the complex goods once more before driving. If you are transporting cargo in a wheelchair, it is always safer to push the wheelchair than to tow it. The speed at which the trolley is pushed or towed by the pallet truck must not exceed the speed of travel. It is forbidden to drive on cargo vehicles or to transport other persons. If it is not possible to eliminate the dangers on the means of work or the appropriate organization of work, then the employer should provide the workers with appropriate personal protective equipment to perform certain tasks in dangerous conditions. Personal protective equipment means equipment worn or held by a worker to protect him from one or more hazards or hazards that may endanger his safety and health. Personal protective equipment should be appropriate to the nature of the work being performed, and an appropriate level of protection should be provided. During work, you are obligated to use the prescribed personal protective equipment in accordance with the instructions of the employer and the risk assessment. Depending on the risks, personal protective equipment can protect all parts of the body, including the eyes, ears, head, arms, face, respiratory organs, and legs. Depending on the needs and specifics of the job, the following personal protective equipment can be used: ear protectors, suitable protective gloves, safety shoes with a protective cap and a puncture-resistant sole, goggles, full face shield when the worker's face is lowered so that it is not visible who he is, respiratory protection, protective helmet, reflective vest, seatbelt for work at height, and other personal protective equipment depending on work tasks. Remember, you must always use personal protective equipment that is prescribed for the jobs you perform. Personal protective equipment should be thoroughly inspected before use, especially for life-saving equipment, such as personal fall restraint systems or personal respiratory protective equipment. Using personal protective equipment can save you from injury or illness and save your life. Occupational safety and health is a priority when performing work tasks. It must not be a formality, because ignoring safety requirements can be life-threatening. In the course of our work, we should do everything in our power to prevent injuries. It is necessary to follow the instructions of the employer, not to underestimate the risks, and always be reasonable. In the work process, each participant has his own role and responsibility related to occupational safety. The employer must develop a positive work culture and implement a quality system of occupational safety and health rules in their work processes. But you must be aware that you are most responsible for your own safety. Your individual decisions and the way you work will be crucial to your safety. Although responsibility is individual, occupational safety always requires teamwork. It is therefore essential that you cooperate with the employer and his proxies. Report to your superior all injuries, all accidents at work that could have caused injuries at work, as well as any malfunction on work equipment. This is very important because the manager must be familiar with all aspects of safety in the work process for which he is superior. Always be responsible and don't pretend you haven't seen it. Remember, non-compliance with safety measures at work may be disciplined by the employer, and this may be the reason for dismissal. Report any injuries and accidents at work. Don't feel uncomfortable because your superior needs to know everything that is important for the safety of the workers he manages, and open communication is a prerequisite for that. If you see that something is wrong, do not hesitate to suggest better solutions. And a few short tips for the end. No job or task is more important than your health. If you can't do a task in a safe way, then don't do it. Every task must be done exclusively in a correct and safe way. In doubtful situations, when you are not sure what is right and you think that the work task is too dangerous or beyond your capabilities, stop and ask for help from your superior. If you follow the rules we presented to you in this video, you are less likely to get injured in your workplace and suffer the consequences of work-related injuries. And we all want to return home safe and healthy to our families. If you have additional questions regarding occupational safety and health, read the instructions provided, and if necessary, contact your supervisor or employer in person.